The spring air inside First Light Baptist Church held the scent of lilies and old hymnals, mixed with the perfume of 200 bodies pressed together in their Sunday best. Lillian Barnes sat in the front pew, her navy dress pressed sharp as prayer, her hands folded over a worn leather wallet in her lap. Inside that wallet, tucked behind a grocery receipt and her Medicare card, was a photograph of her husband Robert, thick-shouldered, dark-skinned, wearing that crooked smile that had first caught her attention 43 years ago at a church picnic just like this one. Robert had been gone 5 years now. Stroke, the death certificate said. Quick and merciless. But sitting here in the church where they'd married, where Victor had been baptized at 8 years old, Lillian could still feel her husband's presence in the worn wood of the pews, in the amber light filtering through the stained glass. Today, though, today was different. Victor James Barnes. The name rang out across the sanctuary, and Lillian's breath caught. Her son, their son, strode across the stage in his cap and gown, diploma in hand, shoulders straight as the day he was born. The congregation erupted. Someone behind her shouted, "That's right, baby, you did it!" Lillian recognized the voice. Gloria Patterson, her best friend of 40 years, who knew better than anyone what this moment meant. Victor accepted the diploma with a firm handshake, his dark eyes scanning the crowd until they found hers. He nodded once. She nodded back, her throat too tight to smile properly. Electrical engineering. GPA 3.8. 3 job offers. The numbers echoed in her mind like a prayer answered. She opened the wallet in her lap, her thumb brushing over Robert's photograph. "He made it, Robert," she whispered, so quiet only God and the dead could hear. "Our boy made it." The memory came unbidden. Victor at 10 years old, kneeling on the kitchen floor beside Robert, watching his father replace an electrical outlet. Robert's big hands moved with surprising delicacy, explaining wire colors, voltage, grounding. His voice patient, professorial. "Hands can fix anything, son," Robert had said. "You just gotta understand how things are connected." Victor had looked up at his father with such reverence, such certainty, as if Robert held all the answers to the universe in those calloused palms. Now, as the ceremony ended and families spilled onto the church lawn for photographs, Lillian stood beside her son, her hand resting lightly on his forearm. Victor towered over her at 6'2", but she still saw that 10-year-old boy in his face, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled for the camera, the small scar above his left eyebrow from the time he'd tripped running to show Robert a lightning bug he'd caught. "You proud of me, Mama?" Victor asked, his voice soft enough that only she could hear over the congratulations of neighbors and church folk. "More than words can say," Lillian replied, and meant it with every cell in her body. But even as she smiled for Gloria's camera, even as she accepted hugs from women who'd known Victor since he was in diapers, something nagged at the edge of her awareness. The way Victor's smile didn't quite reach his eyes when he shook hands with Pastor Williams. The way his shoulders tensed when someone asked which company he'd chosen. The way he kept checking his phone, his jaw tightening with each glance. If she had known then what was coming, the fractures already forming beneath the surface of her son's smile, would she have held him tighter? Would she have asked the right questions? But she didn't know, and so she smiled for the camera and told herself that the hardest part was over. 8 months later, on a gray Friday afternoon in November, Lillian stood at her kitchen sink peeling potatoes for supper when she heard Victor's car pull into the driveway. The engine of his Honda Civic cut off with its familiar sputter. Then silence. 1 minute, 2, 3. She dried her hands on her apron and moved to the window. Victor sat motionless in the driver's seat, both hands gripping the steering wheel, his forehead pressed against the rim. His shoulders were shaking. Lillian's heart dropped into her stomach. By the time she reached the front door, Victor was climbing the porch steps, his face carefully blank, his messenger bag slung over one shoulder. But Lillian had raised this boy. She knew every micro-expression, every tell. "What happened?" she asked before he could speak. Victor stopped on the threshold, one hand on the door frame. For a moment she thought he might cry. Instead he laughed, short, bitter. "They let me go. he said. Third time. Not a good fit, they said. This was the third job in 6 months. Lillian didn't say that. She stepped aside to let him pass, noting the slight stumble in his step, the way he avoided her eyes. What did they say exactly? Victor dropped his bag on the couch with more force than necessary. He turned to face her, and she saw it then, the rage simmering just beneath the carefully controlled surface. Not the hot, explosive anger of youth, but something colder, something that had been building for months. You want the truth, Mama, or you want the polite version? The truth, baby. Always. He laughed again, and this time it cut through the room like broken glass. May, the first one. I had a supervisor, Marcus Reeves. White guy, 20 years in the field, set in his ways. He designed this circuit board for a new project. I saw immediately it was inefficient, using twice the power it needed, running hot. So I fixed it. Sent him the revised specs. You know what he said? Lillian shook her head, though she could already guess. He said I was uppity, said I needed to stay in my lane and respect the hierarchy. When I pushed back, explained the science, he went to HR, called me difficult to work with. I was out by the end of the month. He started pacing, his hands gesturing sharply with each point. August, the second one. I found out they were falsifying safety reports. Equipment that should have been replaced, they just kept passing inspections on. I reported it. Thought I was doing the right thing, protecting people. 2 weeks later, restructuring. I was the only one let go from my entire department. Baby, I'm not finished. His voice had taken on an edge she'd never heard before. This last one. November. I worked 60-hour weeks, Mama. 60. I submitted 5 proposals for improvements. 5. You know what happened? They took my ideas, implemented 3 of them. Then they let me go for cultural fit, said I was too intense, and made other team members uncomfortable. He stopped pacing and looked at her directly for the first time since coming home. They don't want solutions, Mama. They want us quiet. The words hung in the air between them. Lillian wanted to argue, to tell him he was being paranoid, that surely there was another explanation. But she'd lived 58 years as a black woman in Savannah. She'd watched Robert come home defeated too many nights, wearing the same expression Victor wore now. She noticed, as he passed close, the faint smell of beer on his breath. At 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. Victor, have you been drinking? He froze, his back to her. I had 1 beer with a friend after. That's it. Don't start. I'm not starting anything. I'm just asking. Well, don't. He moved toward the stairs, but Lillian's voice stopped him. Your father used to drink when things got hard at work. Victor's hand tightened on the banister. When he turned, his eyes were wet. I'm not Dad. I know, baby. I know. But as he disappeared upstairs, his bedroom door closing with a thud that wasn't quite a slam but held all the same violence, Lillian wasn't sure she believed her own words. That night, after Victor had eaten a silent dinner and retreated back upstairs, Lillian took out the trash. The November air was cold enough to make her breath visible. She was about to go back inside when something caught her eye behind the garbage bin. 3 empty whiskey bottles. Jim Beam, the cheap stuff. She pulled them out one by one, the glass cold in her palms. The labels were weathered, the bottles not freshly emptied. This wasn't from today. This was accumulation. 2 weeks? Maybe 3. Lillian stood in her backyard, holding the evidence of her son's secret, and felt the world tilt slightly on its axis. She thought of Robert, of the bottles she'd found hidden in his workshop after he died, of the AA medallions she'd discovered were bought online, never earned, of all the signs she'd missed because she'd loved him too much to see the truth. She sat down on the back steps, still holding the bottles, and let the cold seep through her dress. From Victor's window above, she could hear the low murmur of his voice, on the phone or talking to himself. She couldn't tell anymore. He pulled through, she whispered to the empty yard, to Robert's ghost, to herself. Victor will too. But the bottles felt heavy in her hands. And for the first time since the graduation ceremony, Lillian allowed herself to feel the fear she'd been pushing down for months. Something was breaking in her son, and she didn't know how to fix it. December arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of weather that made Savannah feel unstuck in time. Lillian tried to maintain their routines: breakfast at 7, dinner at 6, church on Sundays. But Victor was slipping through her fingers like water. 2 weeks after his termination, he had an interview at Walker Industries, a good company, stable, with a reputation for diversity. Lillian ironed his shirt the night before, left it hanging on his door with a note: "You've got this, baby. I believe in you." At noon the next day, she knocked softly on his door. "Victor, you have that interview at 3, remember?" Silence. Then, "I'm not going." Lillian's hand froze on the doorknob. "Baby, they're expecting you." "I said I'm not going." The force of his voice made her step back. She stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door, her own reflection distorted in the wood grain. "Victor, please, just talk to me." A long pause. Then his voice came again, quieter but edged with exhaustion. "Why bother, Mama? They'll see my last 3 jobs and think I'm the problem. 6 months, 6 months, 3 months. That's not a pattern of bad luck. That's a pattern of me." "That's not true." "Yes, it is." A sound like papers shuffling. "You want to see something? Come in." Lillian opened the door carefully. Victor sat at his desk, laptop open, surrounded by printed pages. His room smelled stale, like sleep and unwashed clothes. He gestured to the screen. "Look, Indeed reviews from Walker Industries. Other black engineers who worked there." Lillian leaned in, reading over his shoulder. The reviews were damning. Hostile work environment. Microaggressions daily. Token diversity hires with no real advancement. Don't waste your time if you're not white. "You see?" Victor's voice was flat. "It's rigged, Mama. The whole system. Get the degree, get the experience, play by the rules." "Doesn't matter. They'll find a reason." Lillian didn't know what to say, because part of her, the part that had watched Robert fight this same battle for 30 years, knew he was right. But another part, the part that had pushed her son through calculus homework and college applications, refused to let him give up. "Baby, you can't let fear stop you from trying." Victor closed the laptop. "It's not fear. It's pattern recognition." The interview slot passed. Lillian cooked dinner alone and left a plate in the microwave. Victor came down at midnight to eat it cold, standing at the counter in the dark. She watched from the top of the stairs, her heart breaking with each mechanical bite. By January, the descent had accelerated. At 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, Lillian woke to the sound of Victor's voice, loud and sharp with anger. She wrapped her robe around herself and padded down the hall in bare feet, pressing her ear to his door. "Don't you dare lecture me about responsibility." Pause. "You don't understand. You went to college on a full ride, Damon. On your daddy's dime. I'm doing this alone. I don't have that luxury." Another pause, longer. Then, "Yeah? Well, maybe if someone had actually prepared me for how racist this industry is, instead of feeding me bullshit about meritocracy and hard work, I wouldn't be in this mess." The sound of something hitting the wall, a fist maybe, or his phone. Lillian flinched. She stood in the dark hallway for another 10 minutes, but Victor didn't come out, and she didn't go in. The next morning she saw the damage. A fist-sized dent in the drywall beside his desk. Victor's right hand was swollen, the knuckles scraped raw. "You hurt yourself," she said quietly, standing in his doorway with a first aid kit. Victor looked at his hand as if seeing it for the first time. "It's nothing." "Let me wrap it." "I said it's nothing, Mama." But he let her take his hand, let her clean the scrapes with peroxide, wrap the knuckles in gauze. His skin was warm under her fingers. When had her baby's hands gotten so big? When had the calluses formed? "Who were you talking to last night?" "Damon?" "Your cousin?" "Yeah." Victor's jaw tightened. "He thinks I'm screwing up my life. Thinks I'm making excuses." "What do you think?" Victor pulled his hand away. "I think everybody's got an opinion about my life except me." He left the room before she could respond. Late January brought the loan request. Lillian was folding laundry in the living room when Victor appeared in the doorway. He looked different, cleaner, more alert. For a moment, hope flared in her chest. "Mama, I need to ask you something." "What is it, baby?" Victor sat down across from her, his hands clasped between his knees, the posture of a penitent. "I need to borrow $500. Lillian's hand stilled on the towel she was folding. $500 was 2 weeks of groceries. Her pension was $2,100 a month, carefully budgeted down to the last dollar. "What do you need it for?" Victor took a breath. "Damon got me an interview at his firm in Atlanta. It's a real opportunity, Mama. Project management position, good company. They're actually hiring. But I need—" He gestured to himself, his wrinkled t-shirt, his worn sneakers. "I need to look the part. New suit, decent shoes, haircut. Hotel for the night before, so I'm fresh for the interview. I need to look perfect. One more chance. That's all I'm asking for." The desperation in his voice broke something in her. This wasn't manipulation. This was naked hope. "When's the interview?" "Next Friday." Lillian set down the towel and reached for her purse. She pulled out her checkbook, wrote carefully, $500. "Mama, wait." She added 2 more lines, $200. "You said, for confidence, baby." She tore off the check and pressed it into his hand. "Walk in there knowing you're worth it. You hear me? You're worth it." Victor stared at the check, his eyes shining. Then he pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. "Thank you, Mama. Thank you, I'll pay you back. I promise." "I know you will." She believed it. God help her, she believed every word. February arrived with cold rain. Lillian waited for news from Atlanta. Victor had left on Thursday, returned on Saturday with a new suit still in the garment bag, a fresh haircut that made him look young again, professional. "How did it go?" she asked when he came through the door. Victor set down his overnight bag. "They'll let me know in a week." His voice was carefully neutral, but Lillian had learned to read the spaces between his words. She made his favorite dinner, meatloaf with brown gravy, and didn't push for details. A week passed, then another. Finally, on a Wednesday evening while they were watching Jeopardy, Victor's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and something died in his eyes. "They went with an internal candidate." He stood up and walked to his room without another word. The check was never mentioned again. Lillian didn't ask. The final breaking point came in late February. Lillian had spent Wednesday evening at church, the weekly prayer group with Gloria and 5 other women who'd known each other for decades. They'd prayed for Victor, our sister's son who's struggling to find his way. Gloria had squeezed her hand. "He's going to be fine, Lil. Just give him time." But when Lillian came home at 10 o'clock, she found Victor at the kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey in a glass. The bottle was half empty. The glass was full. "Victor, baby." He looked up at her, and she saw that his eyes were clear. He wasn't drunk. He was sitting there, staring at the amber liquid, fighting some invisible war with himself. "Mama," his voice cracked. "I don't know who I am anymore." Lillian set down her purse and sat across from him, her hands folded on the table between them. "Tell me, I did everything right." The words came slowly, painfully. "Straight A's, no criminal record, engineering degree, good schools, good recommendations, and I can't even keep a job for more than 6 months." His hands shook as he lifted the glass, then set it down again untouched. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I'm too sensitive, too angry, too—" He gestured helplessly. "Too something. Too black for them to be comfortable. Too smart for them to control. Too broken to function. Baby, you are not the problem. The system is broken. Then what do I do?" He looked at her with such raw desperation it hurt to meet his eyes. "What's the point of all this education, all this trying, if I'm just going to be another statistic? Another black man with a degree working at Home Depot? There's nothing wrong with working at Home Depot if—" "Don't." His voice hardened. "Don't do that. Don't make this okay. You and Dad pushed me so hard. Get that degree, son. Make us proud. You can be anything you want." "Well, I got the degree. and I'm miserable." The accusation landed like a slap. Lillian felt her breath catch. "We never pushed you into anything you didn't want, Victor." "Didn't you?" He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "You think I wanted to spend 4 years calculating voltage drops and power loads? I wanted to make music, Mama. I wanted to write songs. But every time I mentioned it, I got the same response. 'That's nice, honey, but engineering is practical.' That's not—" "Yes, it is." His voice rose, then broke. "Every single day, all I heard was provide stable career, think about your future. Like my dreams didn't matter. Like the only thing that mattered was living up to what you and Dad wanted." Lillian stood slowly, her own anger rising to meet his. "Your father and I wanted you to have options, to have security, to not struggle the way we struggled." "Well, congratulations." Victor's laugh was bitter. "I'm secure and stable and completely fucking miserable. And that's on you." He grabbed the whiskey bottle, but instead of drinking, he carried it to the sink and poured it out. The sharp scent filled the kitchen as the amber liquid spiraled down the drain. "I'm not Dad," he said, his back to her. "I won't let it take me." But when he turned around, the look in his eyes, resentment mixed with desperation mixed with something darker, something that looked like hate, made Lillian's blood run cold. "Victor, I need some air." He walked past her and out the back door, leaving her standing alone in the kitchen with the empty bottle and the lingering smell of whiskey and the terrible, growing certainty that something fundamental had shifted between them. Something that might not shift back. March came in like a lion, all wind and rain that battered the azaleas in Lillian's front yard. She spent a Thursday afternoon in the kitchen, making chicken and dumplings the way Robert used to make them. Extra black pepper, a bay leaf simmered in the broth until the whole house smelled like comfort and memory. It had been a week since the whiskey incident. A week of careful silence, of Victor sleeping until 3 in the afternoon, of Lillian pretending everything was fine when Gloria called to check in. But tonight, she told herself, tonight they would sit down together like a family. They would eat and talk and find their way back to each other. She set the table for 2, lit a small candle in the center, and called up the stairs. "Victor, supper's ready." He came down slowly, each footstep heavy on the stairs. When he entered the kitchen and saw the spread, the dumplings steaming in their bowl, the green beans with bacon, the cornbread still warm from the oven, something flickered across his face. Not gratitude, something darker. Resentment, maybe, or shame. They sat. They served themselves. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. "This looks good, Mama," Victor said finally, his voice flat. "It's your favorite. I know what you thought." They ate without speaking. Lillian searched desperately for safe topics, settling finally on something neutral. "Supposed to rain through the weekend. Might be good for the garden. Have you applied anywhere new?" The words came out before she could stop them. "I saw that Morrison Tech was hiring electrical engineers. That's right in your field." Victor's fork clattered against his plate. "You want to know why I can't get a job, Mama?" His voice was low, controlled, but something coiled beneath it like a snake preparing to strike. Lillian's heart began to pound. "I was just suggesting, because I spent my whole life trying to make you happy." He slammed his fist on the table. The candle jumped. Lillian flinched. "You and Dad pushed me into engineering when I wanted to study music. I could have been a musician, Mama. I could have been happy. But no, you needed me to have a stable career and provide for a family, and all that other garbage you fed me since I was old enough to understand what disappointment looked like in your eyes." Lillian's hands gripped the edge of the table. "Victor, we never forced you into anything. You chose engineering yourself. You used to tell your father—" "That's what you tell yourself." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You tell yourself you were supportive, that you let me choose. But you know what I remember?" He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table, his face inches from hers. "I remember being 13 years old, begging to go to music camp that summer. You said, 'That's nice, honey, but engineering camp will look better on college applications.' I remember being 15, writing a song for the talent show, spending weeks on it. You know what Dad said when I played it for him? Son, hobbies don't pay bills. That's not— I'm not finished, his voice cracked. I remember being 17, getting a scholarship offer from Berklee College of Music. Full ride, Mama, my dream school. And you sat me down at this very table and told me to think about my future. Like music wasn't a future. Like the only acceptable path was the one you'd already chosen for me. Each word hit Lillian like a physical blow. She tried to remember, tried to pull up those exact moments from the fog of 15 years of motherhood. You chose engineering, she said weakly. I remember. You told your guidance counselor. I told everyone what you wanted to hear. Victor's eyes were wet now, his voice raw. Because I loved you. Because I wanted to make you proud. Because every time I mentioned music, I saw this look on your face, this disappointment, like I was letting you down just by dreaming. He picked up his plate and hurled it toward the sink. It shattered against the stainless steel, pieces of ceramic scattering across the counter onto the floor. A dumpling slid down the backsplash, leaving a trail of gravy. Everything I did was for you, he was shouting now, tears streaming down his face. Every grade, every award, every sacrifice. And look where it got me. I'm 24 years old, living in my mother's house, can't keep a job, drinking myself to sleep. Is this what you wanted? Is this your stable career? Victor, please. I'm done. His voice went suddenly quiet. Dead. I'm done trying to be the son you wanted instead of the person I am. He walked out, not storming, just walking, like he was leaving a room he'd never intended to enter in the first place. His footsteps on the stairs, his door closing with a soft click that was somehow worse than a slam. Lillian sat alone at the table, the chicken and dumplings growing cold, her hands shaking in her lap. She tried to remember. Victor at 13. She saw him clearly, sitting at this same table with brochures spread out. But what had the brochures been for? Engineering camp. She was certain. He'd been so excited about building robots. Victor at 15. The science fair. He'd won second place with that solar panel design. He'd come home glowing, talking about efficiency and renewable energy. Had there been a song? A talent show? Victor at 17. The acceptance letters. She remembered them arriving, thick envelopes from Georgia Tech, Clemson, Auburn. He'd opened them into the kitchen counter, reading each one aloud with pride in his voice. Had there been something from Berklee? She couldn't picture it. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she'd been so focused on the path she thought was right that she'd erased the other possibilities. Maybe Victor's memories were true, and hers were the revision. Or maybe— and this thought chilled her. Maybe he'd rewritten the story in his mind until he believed his own revision. Maybe he needed someone to blame for his failures, and she was convenient. Lillian stood on shaking legs and began to clean. She swept up the shattered plate, wiped the gravy from the backsplash, covered the leftovers that no one would eat. She moved mechanically, her mind elsewhere. In the living room, she pulled out the old photo albums. Victor's childhood, documented in hundreds of images. She flipped through slowly, looking for evidence, looking for truth. Age 13, a photo of Victor at engineering camp, holding up a small robot he'd built. His smile was genuine. No one had forced that smile. Age 15, the science fair photo. Victor standing next to his solar panel display, holding his second-place ribbon. In the background, visible on a table behind him, a guitar case. Why had he brought a guitar to a science fair? Age 17, a photo of Victor on graduation day from high school, surrounded by envelopes. She could see the letterheads. Georgia Tech, Clemson, Auburn. But there, partially hidden under the others, a corner of another envelope. The logo was partially visible. It could have been anything, or it could have been Berklee. Lillian closed the album and pressed her palms against her eyes. She didn't know. After 18 years of raising this boy, after thousands of conversations and decisions and moments, she didn't know what was true anymore. Upstairs, she could hear Victor moving around. The sound of drawers opening and closing, the rustle of clothing. Was he packing? She sat in the dark living room, her hands folded in her lap, and tried to remember the last time Victor had looked her in the eye with genuine warmth. Tried to pinpoint the exact moment when love had curdled into resentment. The candle on the dining table had burned itself out. The smoke drifted through the house, acrid and final. March bled into April, and Victor stopped pretending. He stopped setting alarms, stopped checking job boards, stopped showering regularly. His room became a cave that Lillian only glimpsed when she knocked on the door with plates of food he barely touched. Gloria came by on a Wednesday afternoon, bearing a casserole in concern. "How's Victor doing?" she asked, setting the dish on the counter. Lillian forced a smile. "He's just between opportunities. You know how it is for young people these days." "Lil," Gloria's voice was gentle. "I can hear him up there. He's not okay. He's processing. He's had some setbacks, but, honey," Gloria took Lillian's hands, "he needs professional help. This isn't just job trouble. This is something deeper." Lillian pulled away, busying herself with coffee cups. "He just needs time. Robert was like this after his mama died. He got through it." "Robert got help," Gloria said carefully. "He went to meetings. He had support." "And Victor has me. That's not enough, Lil. Love can't fix everything." After Gloria left, Lillian stood at the base of the stairs, listening. Victor's voice drifted down, low and angry, talking on the phone. "I know, Damon. I know I'm fucking up. But you don't understand what it's like. No, you don't. You walked into your job with your dad's connections, your mom's social network. I had nothing but a degree and hope. And hope doesn't mean shit when they've already decided you're not good enough." Lillian climbed the stairs and knocked softly. "Victor? Baby?" The voice stopped. Then, "I'm busy, Mama. I just want to talk." "I said I'm busy." She stood there for a long moment, her hand flat against the door, feeling the vibration of his anger through the wood. Then she turned and walked back downstairs. That night, she lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, telling herself that this was normal, that young men struggled, that he would find his way, that she just needed to be patient and supportive, and everything would work itself out. The lies we tell ourselves, she thought, are sometimes the only things that let us sleep. On the last Saturday in April, Lillian was weeding the front garden when a car pulled up to the curb. She recognized it immediately. Damon's silver Lexus, always immaculate, always expensive. Victor's cousin climbed out wearing khakis and a polo shirt, looking every inch the successful pharmaceutical sales rep he was. 29 years old, married with 2 kids, a house in the suburbs. Everything Victor wasn't. "Aunt Lillian." Damon's hug was warm but tense. "Damon, what a surprise! Victor didn't tell me you were coming." "He doesn't know." Damon glanced at the house. "Is he home?" "Upstairs. You want me to—" "Actually, I came to see you." Something in his tone made Lillian set down her trowel. "What's wrong? Can we talk inside?" Lillian made sweet tea while Damon sat at the kitchen table, his fingers drumming nervously on the wood. When she set the glass in front of him, he didn't drink. "Aunt Lillian, Victor's been calling me, late at night, 2, 3 in the morning. He's drunk, and he's—" Damon paused, choosing his words carefully. "He's not in a good place. I know he's struggling, but he told me about the jobs. All 3 of them." Damon looked at her directly. "Did he tell you what really happened?" Lillian's stomach dropped. "What do you mean, what really happened?" "The first job, with Marcus Reeves." Damon's voice was gentle but firm. "Victor told you Marcus was racist, right? That he called Victor uppity for improving a design?" "Yes. That part's true. But Victor left out the part where he sent that revised design to Marcus's boss and the CEO without telling Marcus. He went over his supervisor's head on his second week at the company." Lillian set down her own glass carefully. "He was trying to help." "He was being arrogant, Aunt Lillian. Marcus had 20 years of experience. Maybe his design wasn't perfect, but there are ways to offer suggestions. Victor didn't suggest. He went around Marcus and made him look incompetent to the entire company." "But the racism was real," Damon said. "I'm not saying it wasn't. Marcus probably did use that word, but Victor created the situation. He doesn't know how to navigate these spaces. He comes in thinking his degree makes him untouchable, and when people push back, he assumes it's only about race. Lillian felt something cold spreading through her chest. What about the second job, the safety reports? Damon took a breath. That one's more complicated. The company was cutting corners. Victor was right to report it. But the way he did it, he rubbed his face. He didn't go through proper channels. He didn't document everything first. He went straight to the state regulatory board and accused the CEO of criminal negligence. In an email with typos. Oh, God. They would have fired him anyway for whistleblowing. But Victor made it easy for them to claim he was unstable, unprofessional. He was right about the problem, but wrong about how to handle it. And the third job? Damon's expression was pained. Aunt Lillian, those 60-hour weeks, those 5 proposals. Victor was trying to do in 3 months what should take 3 years. He was overstepping constantly, correcting senior engineers in meetings, sending unsolicited advice to department heads. The ideas were good, but the delivery, he shook his head. I talked to someone who worked with him. They said Victor was brilliant but exhausting. He made people feel stupid. He couldn't take direction. And when they tried to give him feedback, he accused them of racial bias. Lillian couldn't speak. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm. I'm not saying racism doesn't exist, Damon continued. I face it every day. But Aunt Lillian, there's a difference between being black and being difficult. Victor is both. He's your cousin, Lillian said, her voice barely above a whisper. How can you say these things about him? Because I love him. Damon's eyes were wet. And because someone needs to tell you the truth. You can't help him if you don't see the real problem. Victor is brilliant, but he's also arrogant, defensive, and unwilling to learn from mistakes. And you keeping him afloat, giving him money, making excuses for him, is killing him. He's not growing. He's just festering. Lillian stood abruptly. I think you should go. Aunt Lillian. Get out of my house. Damon stood slowly, his face etched with sadness. At the door, he turned back. He needs therapy, Auntie. Not money, not excuses. Professional help. And if you love him, you'll stop protecting him from the consequences of his choices. The door closed quietly behind him. Lillian stood in her kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of her sweet tea and her shattered certainty, and felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Upstairs, a door opened. Footsteps on the stairs. Victor appeared in the kitchen doorway, his hair wild from sleep. Was that Damon's car? Lillian looked at her son, really looked at him, at the defensive set of his shoulders, at the anger simmering in his eyes, at the way he was already preparing for confrontation before she'd even spoken. We need to talk about your job situations, she said quietly. Victor's jaw tightened. What did Damon tell you? That you haven't been entirely honest with me. He came here to talk shit about me? Victor's voice rose. That's what he does? Drives an hour to tell my own mother I'm a failure? He came because he's worried about you. And so am I. Oh, here we go. Victor laughed bitterly. Let me guess. He told you I was the problem at all those jobs. That it wasn't racism, it was just me being difficult. Right? That's his story? Victor, I'm asking you directly. Lillian kept her voice steady. Were you fired for racism or for your behavior? The question hung in the air like smoke. Victor's face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, hurt, rage. He stepped closer, his hands clenched at his sides. So you believe him over me, your own son? I believe something's wrong, and I think you need help. Help? Victor's laugh was sharp. You mean like Dad got? AA meetings where he talked about what a disappointment he was? Where he cried about never being good enough for this family? Lillian went very still. What? Oh, you didn't know? Victor's voice dripped with venom. You thought Dad's recovery was this beautiful success story? You thought he was sober and happy? Your father went to meetings for 2 years. He had his chips. He was drunk, Mama. Victor's voice broke. The whole time, every single day. The kitchen tilted. Lillian reached for the counter to steady herself. That's not true. I would have known. Would you? Victor's eyes were wild now, years of secrets spilling out like poison. Just like you knew I was struggling? Just like you knew Dad was miserable? You see what you want to see, Mama. You live in this fantasy where everything is fine if we just try hard enough. But Dad couldn't keep living the lie. Stop it. Those nights he came home late from meetings? Victor's voice was relentless now, cruel. He was at the Rusty Anchor, 3 miles from here, drinking Jim Beam until he could barely stand. Then he'd call me. Come get me, son. Don't tell your mama. You're lying. But Lillian's voice had no strength behind it. I was 16 years old, driving on a learner's permit to drag my drunk father out of bars, helping him sober up in his truck before we came home, covering for him, lying for him, protecting you from the truth because he said you wouldn't understand. Because women like you need us to be heroes, and he was tired of being a hero. Tears streamed down Victor's face, but his voice never wavered. His 30-day chip? Bought on eBay? 60-day? Amazon. The 1-year medallion you keep in your jewelry box like it's a holy relic? He ordered it online 2 days before he gave it to you. Lillian's legs gave out. She sank into a chair, her hands gripping the table. The stroke, she whispered. The doctors said the stroke was real. Victor's voice softened, but the words cut deeper. But it happened after a 3-day binge. I found him on the bathroom floor, Mama. He was conscious. He could still talk. You know what his last words to me were? Not I love you. Not take care of your mother. He said, don't tell her. Promise me you won't tell her. No. I promised. Victor wiped his face with the back of his hand. I kept his secret for 8 years. I protected you from the truth. And this is how you repay me? By calling me a liar? By believing Damon over your own son? He turned to leave, but Lillian found her voice. Why? It came out as a broken whisper. Why didn't you tell me? Victor stopped in the doorway, his back to her. Because you can't handle the truth, Mama. You never could. You need your fairy tale. The perfect marriage. The devoted mother. The golden son. Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we're all broken. Dad was broken. I'm broken. And the only person who doesn't see it is you. He walked up the stairs, each footstep like a nail in a coffin. His door closed, not slammed, but the quiet click was worse. Final. Lillian sat alone in the kitchen, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, and felt the foundation of her life crack and crumble. After several minutes, or maybe hours, she'd lost track of time, she stood on shaking legs and walked to her bedroom, to the closet where Robert's things still hung, shirts she couldn't bring herself to donate, to the drawer where she kept his important items. At the back, hidden under old tax returns, she found it. Robert's old cell phone. The one he'd used before smartphones. The one she'd thought was lost. Her hands trembled as she plugged it in to charge. The battery was dead, had been dead for 5 years, but the charger still worked. The screen flickered to life. She opened the text messages. Dad, I can't do this anymore. Victor, you have to, Dad. For Mama, Dad. Your mama deserves better than a drunk for a husband. Victor, please don't talk like that. Dad, I'm sorry I'm weak, son. I'm sorry I made you my accomplice. Message after message. Hundreds of them. Years of them. Photos. Robert at bar counters, his eyes glazed. Robert in his truck passed out. Robert crying, the camera slightly out of focus as if Victor had taken the picture while helping his father. The last text, dated 3 days before Robert died. Victor, Dad, where are you? It's 2 a.m. Dad, the anchor. I can't stop, son. I've tried. Victor, I'm coming to get you. Dad, I don't deserve you. Tell your mama I'm sorry. Lillian's phone slipped from her hands and clattered on the dresser. She looked up at her wedding photo, at Robert's smile that had always seemed so genuine, and realized she'd never known him at all. And worse, She'd never really seen her son either. The young man who'd shouldered his father's addiction alone, who'd driven illegally through dark streets to rescue a parent who should have been rescuing him, who'd kept a secret for 8 years to protect her fantasy. She'd failed them both, Robert in his addiction, Victor in his aftermath. And now she sat in a house full of lies, holding evidence of a marriage that had been hollow, a widow's grief that had been based on fiction. Lillian pulled the photo of Robert from the dresser and held it, not with reverence, not with love, but with a grief so profound it had no name. The grief of realizing you've been mourning a ghost that never existed. Outside, the sun was setting. Inside, everything was dark. Victor left on a Monday morning in early May. Lillian heard him moving around upstairs, the sound of a suitcase being zipped, footsteps on the stairs. She stayed in the living room, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, and didn't go to him. He appeared in the doorway, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. "I'm going to stay with Damon for a while." Lillian nodded. "How long?" "I don't know. A few months, maybe longer." He shifted his weight, not quite meeting her eyes. "Teresa, Damon's wife, she said I could help with the kids. Maybe get my head right." "And then what?" Victor finally looked at her. "I don't know, Mama. I just know I can't be here right now." "Because of what you told me about your father?" "Because of everything." His voice was tired, not angry, just exhausted. "I need space to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be what everyone expects." Lillian set down her coffee cup. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry." "For what?" "For not seeing, for not asking the right questions, for letting you carry your father's burden alone." Victor's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back. "I'm sorry, too, for blaming you, for the things I said, for—" he gestured helplessly, "for being such a mess." They stood there, 10 feet and 8 years of secrets between them. "Will you call?" Lillian asked. "Eventually." Victor picked up his bag. "I just need some time." He walked out the front door, loaded his car, and drove away. Lillian watched from the window until his Honda disappeared around the corner, and then she sat in the silence of her house and let herself break. Gloria found her 3 days later, still in the same chair, surrounded by photo albums and Robert's old phone. "Oh, honey." Gloria knelt beside her, taking in the scene. "How long have you been sitting here?" "I don't know." Lillian's voice was hoarse. "Does it matter?" Gloria looked at the photos spread across the coffee table. Robert at bars, Victor as a teenager driving his father home, the text messages displayed on the old phone. "He lied to me," Lillian whispered. "For 12 years, and I never knew." "Oh, Lil." "And Victor was just a boy. He shouldn't have had to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Gloria sat beside her, taking her hands. "You need help, honey. Real help. Not just me bringing casseroles and pretending everything's fine." "I don't know who I am anymore," Lillian said. "My whole life was built on lies. My marriage, my understanding of my son, everything." "Then you need to rebuild." Gloria squeezed her hands. "From the truth this time. No more protecting yourself from what's real." That afternoon, Gloria drove Lillian to First Light Baptist. Pastor Williams, who'd known the family for 30 years, sat with them in his office and listened to the whole story. "Addiction," he said carefully, "is a family disease. Robert was sick. Victor got caught in that sickness. And you, Sister Lillian, you did what you thought was right with the information you had. I should have seen it." "Maybe, but beating yourself up won't help Victor now." Pastor Williams leaned forward. "What will help is getting yourself right first. You can't pour from an empty cup." He gave her the number for Al-Anon, a support group for families affected by addiction. Even though Robert was gone, Pastor Williams said, the patterns remained. The enabling, the denial, the need to control outcomes through love alone. "Robert's death didn't end the addiction's effect on this family," he said. "It just shifted to Victor. And now you have a choice. Keep playing your role in this dance, or learn new steps." Lillian went to her first Al-Anon meeting that Thursday evening. 12 people sat in a circle in the church basement, and Lillian felt exposed in her grief, raw in her shame. When it was her turn to speak, she said, "My husband was an alcoholic. I didn't know until after he died. My son hid it from me. And now my son is... I don't know what he is. Lost, angry, gone." A woman across the circle, maybe 50, nodded. "I didn't know my husband was using for 5 years. 5 years in the same bed, and I didn't know. Or I didn't let myself know. There's a difference." Others shared similar stories. Spouses, children, parents. All of them had loved someone struggling with addiction. All of them had enabled without meaning to. All of them had learned too late that love without boundaries becomes destruction. After the meeting, the woman who'd spoken approached Lillian. "First meetings are the hardest," she said. "I'm Margaret. If you ever need to talk." Lillian took her number, grateful for the lifeline. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Victor was learning his own lessons. Damon's house was chaos. 2 kids under 5, toys everywhere, dishes in the sink, laundry in perpetual motion. Teresa, Damon's wife, put Victor to work immediately. "You want to stay here rent-free? Fine, but you're helping. Kids, dishes, yard work. You don't get to hide in the guest room feeling sorry for yourself." It was exactly what Victor needed. He drove the kids to daycare. He learned to cook chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. He mowed the lawn, fixed the fence, helped Teresa with grocery shopping. Simple tasks, physical tasks, things that had clear beginnings and endings, unlike the mess of his thoughts. Damon made therapy a condition of staying. "I have a guy. You're going. Not negotiable." Dr. Marcus Hayes was a black man in his 40s who'd worked primarily with young men of color. Their first session, he asked Victor one question. "What are you running from?" Victor spent the hour listing everyone else's failures. His racist bosses, his enabling mother, his drunk father who'd made him an accomplice, his cousin who judged him, the system that was rigged against him. Dr. Hayes listened without interrupting. At the end, he said, "Next week, I want you to tell me about your failures. Not theirs, yours." Victor hated him immediately, but he came back. Week 2, Dr. Hayes asked again, "Your failures, tell me." Victor resisted, deflected. Finally, angry, he said, "I was arrogant at my first job. I went over my supervisor's head. I made him look stupid in front of the company." "Why?" "Because I was right." "That's not why." Dr. Hayes leaned forward. "Try again." Victor's jaw clenched. "Because I wanted to prove I was smarter than him. Because he was white and I was black, and I wanted him to know he wasn't better than me." "And how did that work out?" "I got fired." "Right. So your desire to prove your worth actually proved his point, that you weren't ready for that position. Not because of your skin color, but because of your judgment." It hit Victor like a punch to the gut. Over the following weeks, they unpacked everything. Victor's rejection sensitivity dysphoria, the way every professional setback felt like a personal attack on his worth. His pattern of leading with defiance instead of diplomacy. His terror that if he wasn't perfect, he was worthless. "You know what your real problem is," Dr. Hayes said in their 6th session. "You think you have to be twice as good to get half as far. And you're right. That's often true for black men. But your response to that injustice is to reject all feedback, all authority, all guidance. You've gone from 'I have to be perfect' to 'everyone's against me.' Neither is true. So what's the truth? The truth is you're brilliant and arrogant. The system is racist and you have work to do. Both things are true, and until you accept both, you'll keep failing." Back in Savannah, Lillian was doing her own work. Al-Anon taught her about enabling versus helping, about how her love for Robert had blinded her to his suffering, about how her need to protect Victor had actually harmed him. "You taught him that lying was acceptable if it protected you," Margaret said over coffee one afternoon. "Robert lied. Victor lied. And you rewarded the lie by not asking hard questions. That's the pattern you have to break." Lillian started going through the house, clearing out Robert's things, not erasing him, but right-sizing his memory. He'd been a human man who struggled, not a saint. And she'd been a wife who'd chosen comfort over truth. She found more evidence of his addiction: bottles hidden in the garage, receipts from bars, credit card statements showing cash withdrawals at odd hours. The documentation of a double life she'd been too afraid to see. But she also found his journal, hidden in his workshop. In it, Robert had written about his shame, his weakness, his love for his family, and his self-hatred for being unable to stop drinking. "I'm destroying the people I love most. Lillian deserves honesty, but I'm too weak to give it to her. Victor deserves a father, but all I can give him is my darkness. Maybe they'd be better off without me." The final entry dated 2 days before his death. "I can't stop. God help me. I've tried. The bottle owns me. Maybe it's time to admit that. Maybe it's time to tell the truth and face what comes. Victor shouldn't have to carry this anymore. Neither should Lillian. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll tell them." But tomorrow never came. The stroke took him first. Lillian sat in his workshop holding the journal and finally let herself mourn the real Robert. Not the fantasy she'd constructed, but the flawed, struggling human man who'd loved her and failed her and suffered alone. "I forgive you," she whispered to his ghost, "and I'm sorry I didn't see." By late June, both Lillian and Victor had been in therapy for 2 months. Neither knew the other was doing the same work, learning the same lessons from different angles. Victor had gotten a job at a warehouse, night shifts, loading trucks. It was humbling, exhausting, and exactly what he needed. No one cared about his degree. No one asked about his potential. He just did the work, got paid, went home. Teresa noticed the change first. "You're different," she said one morning when Victor came home from his shift. "Calmer." "I'm tired," Victor said, but he was smiling. "No, it's more than that. You're not angry all the time." He thought about it. She was right. The rage that had simmered in his gut for a year had cooled to something manageable. Not gone. He was still dealing with racism at work, still felt the sting of being underestimated. But he was learning to respond instead of react. Dr. Hayes had said, "Anger is information. It tells you something's wrong. But what you do with that information, that's character." One evening in mid-June, Victor sat on Damon's back porch, watching the kids play in the sprinkler. His phone sat on the table beside him, Lillian's number highlighted. He'd been thinking about calling for weeks, but what would he say? He'd destroyed her image of his father. He'd blamed her for his failures. He'd left her alone with the wreckage. Damon came out with 2 beers, sat down beside him. "You going to call her or just stare at the phone?" "I don't know what to say." "Start with 'Hi, Mama.' See where it goes from there." Victor picked up the phone, set it down again. "I told her things I can't take back. You told her the truth. Ugly truth, but truth. Now you have to figure out what comes next." Damon took a sip of his beer. "You know she's an Al-Anon?" Victor's head snapped up. "How do you know that?" "Gloria called Teresa. They talk." Damon smiled. "Your mama's doing her own work, Victor. Just like you. Maybe it's time you did it together." That night, Victor typed and deleted a dozen messages. Finally, he settled on something simple. "Mama, I'm sorry. Can we talk?" He hit send before he could overthink it. 3 minutes later, his phone rang. Her name on the screen. Victor's hand shook as he answered. "Hi, Mama." "Hi, baby." Her voice was thick with tears. "I miss you." "I miss you too." Silence. Then Lillian said, "I think we need to tell each other the truth. All of it. No more secrets." "I'd like that." Victor's own eyes filled. "But I don't know where to start." "How about this?" Lillian said. "Come home. Not to stay. I know you're not ready for that. But come for dinner. We'll sit down and we'll talk. Really talk. Like we should have done a long time ago." Victor looked out at Damon's backyard, at the simple domestic happiness his cousin had built. Then he thought of his mother, alone in that house full of ghosts and lies. "Okay," he said. "This weekend?" "This weekend." After they hung up, Victor sat in the dark, feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Not happiness exactly, but hope. The fragile, tentative hope that maybe things could be different. Maybe they could both be different. Maybe truth, as painful as it was, could be the foundation for something real. Victor arrived on Saturday afternoon, his Honda pulling into the driveway at exactly 3 o'clock. Lillian watched from the window as he sat in the car for a long moment, gathering courage. Then he climbed out, wearing clean jeans and a button-down shirt, looking more like himself than he had in months. She opened the door before he could knock. "Hi, baby." "Hi, Mama." They stood on the threshold, neither quite ready to bridge the distance with a hug. Finally, Lillian stepped aside. "I made lemonade. It's hot out there." "That sounds good." The formality felt strange, like they were strangers learning each other's shapes. Victor followed her to the living room, where she'd set out 2 glasses and a plate of cookies neither of them would eat. They sat across from each other, the coffee table between them like a negotiating table. "You look good," Lillian said. "Healthier." "I've been working. Night shifts at a warehouse. It's humbling, but," he shrugged, "it's honest work." "Your father would be proud." Victor's face tightened. "Would he?" "The real Robert, yes. The man who struggled. He'd understand what you're doing." They sipped lemonade in silence. Finally, Victor set down his glass. "I've been seeing a therapist, Dr. Hayes. Damon made it a condition of staying with them." "I've been going to Al-Anon," Lillian said, "learning about enabling, about how I protected myself from truth instead of protecting you." Victor's eyes widened slightly. "Really?" "Really." Lillian folded her hands in her lap. "I think we both have things we need to say, things we've been avoiding." "Yeah." Victor pulled out a small notebook, his therapy homework. "Dr. Hayes said I should write down what I needed to tell you, so I don't deflect or blame. Just the truth." "Then start there, baby. I'm listening." Victor opened the notebook, his hands shaking slightly. "I blamed you for my failures because I couldn't face that they were my failures. You and Dad didn't force me into engineering. I chose it. And when it got hard, when I started failing, I needed a villain. You were there." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I rewrote our history in my head. Made you the controlling mother who crushed my dreams. But the truth is, I barely touched that guitar after I got it for Christmas. The truth is, I begged for that electronics kit, not the music camp. The truth is, when the Berkeley letter came, and it did come, you were right about that, I threw it away myself because I was already committed to Georgia Tech." Lillian's breath caught, but she stayed silent. "I have something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria," Victor continued. "Dr. Hayes explained it. It's common in Black men who face constant professional rejection. Every job loss felt like death, like proof that I was worthless. So I created a story where none of it was my fault. The racist bosses, the incompetent coworkers, the controlling mother. Everyone was against me." "Were they?" Lillian asked softly. "The bosses, I mean. Was it all in your head?" "No." Victor's voice was firm. "The racism was real, Mama. Marcus did call me uppity. The second company did retaliate for whistleblowing. The third place did have microaggressions, but..." He swallowed hard. "I also went over Marcus's head in my second week. I sent that whistleblowing email drunk at 2 a.m. with typos. I corrected senior engineers in meetings without being asked. I was arrogant, defensive. I expected them to be racist, so I went in with my guard up, and that made me look like the problem." He closed the notebook. "Damon was right. There's a difference between being Black and being difficult. I'm both. The system is rigged, but I also sabotaged myself. Both things are true." Tears streamed down his face. "And the worst part? I knew Dad was struggling. I enabled his drinking because he made me feel like a hero, like I was saving him. But I wasn't saving him. I was helping him die slowly. And then I did the same thing to you, letting you enable me, taking your money, blaming you for caring. I became him, Mama. The liar, the manipulator, the drunk." "You're not drunk now," Lillian said gently. "No, but I came close." That bottle at the kitchen table? I stared at it for an hour, Mama, trying to decide if I was strong enough not to become him. I poured it out, but it was close. Too close. Lillian reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you for telling me the truth. Victor gripped her hand like a lifeline. Your turn. Lillian took a deep breath. I enabled your father's drinking because facing it meant admitting my marriage was a lie. I chose comfort over truth. When you started struggling, I did the same thing. I made excuses. I gave you money without boundaries. I told everyone you were between opportunities instead of admitting you needed help. She squeezed his hand tighter. When you blamed me for pushing you into engineering, part of me wanted to believe it. Because if I was the villain, then you weren't failing. You were just misguided. That wasn't fair to you. It robbed you of agency, of the chance to take responsibility and grow. I robbed myself of that too, Victor said. But I'm your mother. I should have known better. Lillian's voice cracked. I failed your father by not seeing his pain. I failed you by seeing it and doing nothing except enabling it. I chose the fairy tale over the truth, and that choice hurt everyone. What about the jobs? Victor asked. Did you believe Damon? I believe both of you, Lillian said carefully. I believe you faced racism. I also believe you handled it poorly. Both things can be true. Victor nodded slowly. Dr. Hayes says the same thing. They sat in silence, still holding hands across the table. I'm angry, Lillian said finally. About Dad's lies. About you carrying that secret. About the blame you put on me. But mostly I'm angry at myself for creating an environment where truth felt too dangerous to speak. I'm angry too, Victor said. At Dad for making me his accomplice. At myself for blaming you. At the system for being exactly as broken as I feared. But Dr. Hayes says anger is just information. It tells me something's wrong. What I do with it? That's character. So what do we do now? Lillian asked. Victor pulled out another page from his notebook. Dr. Hayes and I came up with some boundaries. Things I need if we're going to rebuild this. Tell me. I'm staying in Atlanta for at least 3 more months. I need the distance. I need to prove to myself I can work, pay bills, function without falling apart. Okay. I'm continuing therapy, weekly, non-negotiable. Good. I'm going back to school part-time, online, project management certification. Engineering didn't work out the way I planned, but I can pivot. I'm not too proud anymore. I'm proud of you for that, Lillian said. And I need you to stop giving me money, even if I ask, even if I'm desperate. I need to learn to handle my own problems. That one hurt, but Lillian nodded. I can do that. If I relapse, if I start drinking, if I spiral again, you can't save me. You have to let me face the consequences. That's the hardest one, Lillian whispered. I know, but it's the most important. Lillian wiped her eyes. My turn? Your turn. I'm continuing Al-Anon. I'm learning I can't control outcomes, only my responses. Good. I'm asking you to be honest with me, even when it's hard, even when you think I can't handle it. I've spent too long living in comfortable lies. I can do that. And I need you to forgive me. Not today, maybe not for a long time, but eventually, I need to know that's possible. Victor's eyes filled again. Mama, I forgave you the moment I understood you were human, the moment I realized you were doing your best with the tools you had. We both were. They stood simultaneously and met in the middle, wrapping their arms around each other. Victor was taller, broader, but in that moment, Lillian felt him as the little boy he'd been, the one who'd needed her and whom she'd failed to fully see. I love you, she whispered into his shirt. I love you too, Mama. They held each other and cried, not the tears of grief, but of release, of truth finally spoken, of a foundation being laid, not on fantasy, but on the solid ground of reality. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through their tears. You hungry? Lillian asked. I could make us some dinner. Actually, yeah, I'm starving. They moved to the kitchen together. Lillian pulled out ingredients while Victor washed his hands at the sink. As she chopped vegetables, he stood beside her, drying the cutting board, and for the first time in a year, the silence between them felt comfortable. Mama? Yeah, baby? Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for coming back. December arrived with a rare cold snap that turned Savannah white with frost. Lillian stood in her kitchen on Christmas afternoon, basting a turkey while Gloria set the table. How many we got coming? Gloria asked. Let's see, you, me, Victor, Damon's family. That's 7. Pastor Williams said he'd stop by, so 8. Look at you hosting Christmas dinner. When's the last time you did that? Lillian smiled. 5 years. Not since Robert died. The doorbell rang. Lillian wiped her hands and opened it to find Victor standing on the porch, holding a pie. Merry Christmas, Mama. Merry Christmas, baby. He looked good. Healthy. His face had filled out from regular meals and sleep. He wore a sweater Teresa had given him, his hair freshly cut. Sweet potato pie, he said, handing it over. Teresa's recipe. I made it myself. You cooked? Lillian feigned shock. I'm learning. Turns out I'm pretty good at following directions when I actually try. Inside, the house filled with voices. Damon's kids tore through the living room. Teresa helped Gloria in the kitchen. Victor fixed Lillian's garbage disposal, which had been acting up. Hands can fix anything, he said as he worked. Just gotta understand how things are connected. Lillian heard Robert in those words, but the ghost didn't hurt anymore. It was just memory, just truth. Over dinner, Pastor Williams said grace. Lord, we thank you for this food, this family, and the courage to face hard truths. Amen. Amen, they echoed. As they ate, Damon asked Victor about work. Got promoted to shift supervisor last month, Victor said, a hint of pride in his voice. And I'm halfway through my project management certification. Any job prospects? Gloria asked. Applied to 3 companies. Got rejected by all of them. Victor smiled. But I didn't spiral. Just updated my resume and kept going. That's growth, man, Damon said, raising his glass. After dinner, Victor helped Lillian with dishes. Through the window, they watched the kids play in the frost-covered yard. I've been thinking, Victor said, scrubbing a plate, about applying for this program. It helps formerly incarcerated people and people with employment gaps get back into the workforce. I know I don't fit the traditional profile, but you have a gap and you need support, Lillian finished. Sounds perfect. Yeah, he rinsed the plate. I've been seeing someone. Her name's Jasmine. We met at a community center. She's a teacher. That's wonderful, baby. It's early, but she knows everything. About the jobs, the drinking, the struggles. I'm not hiding anymore. Good. They worked in comfortable silence. Then Victor said, I paid back $400 of what I owe you. It's not all of it yet, but... Victor, you didn't have to? I did. I borrowed $700. I'm paying back $700. $50 a paycheck until it's done. Lillian set down her dish towel and hugged him from the side. Your father would be so proud. Not the fantasy version. The real Robert. The one who struggled and tried and kept going anyway. Yeah, Victor said softly. I think he would. Later, after everyone had left and it was just the 2 of them, Lillian and Victor sat on the front porch despite the cold. The street was quiet, Christmas lights twinkling on neighboring houses. You think we're going to be okay? Victor asked. I think we're going to keep trying, Lillian said. That's all any of us can do. That's enough, Victor said. Trying is enough. They sat together in the cold, watching their breath fog in the air, and Lillian felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness exactly. There was still too much healing to do for easy happiness. But peace. The peace that comes from living in truth, however painful. Victor pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of the street view. Then he took one of Lillian. For my therapist, he explained. He likes to see progress. Says pictures help remind us how far we've come. How far have we come? Victor thought about it. From lying to each other to telling the truth. From enabling to boundaries. From fantasy to reality. That's pretty far. Yeah, it is. They sat until the cold drove them inside. As Victor gathered his things to drive back to Atlanta, Lillian stopped him at the door. Same time next month? Same time next month? He agreed. She watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing into the December night, and closed the door on another chapter. Not perfect, but honest. And that, Lillian had learned, was worth more than any fairy tale. Inside, she cleaned up the last of the dishes, turned off the Christmas lights, and went to bed. On her nightstand sat a new photo, Victor and her on the porch tonight, both smiling, both real. And that was enough.